One, let's go.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I know we have a bit of a smaller group here due to some time zone differences, but for those people that are tuning in and can't make it right now, but are watching later, welcome. Thank you so much for watching this and for joining us on this really exciting discussion on the future of generative AI. Just a quick background before we dive into the discussion. This group it's hosted by the AI Future Lab, which is a project that's spun out of the Global Shapers, hosted by the World Economic Forum group. And it consists of a global community of young people in the field of artificial intelligence all over the globe. And so, we'll be doing more discussions in the coming months. So feel free to sign up for our newsletter and follow us on Twitter if you want more announcements. But I'm so excited because I have some of my favorite fellow global shapers from the global community here. And without further ado, let me give them a brief introduction. So we have today Dr. Julian Weissenberg. He's the founder of Deep Tech Experts. He has a very seasoned background in the field of artificial intelligence, and he's based in Zurich, Switzerland. Then we also have Rashi Saxena as well, co-chair of the Internet Rights and Principles Dynamic Coalition, with a research background specializing in AI ethics, but I feel like I'm totally not doing justice in terms of the introductions. And I here am Lorne Pfeiffer. I'm a former global shaper from the San Francisco chapter, and also one of the founding co-members of the AI Future Lab here. So let's dive right on in, folks. I'm so excited to have you. I wish this was in person, but one of these days we will do this. Generative AI, right? I feel like that's a huge buzzword now. Like everyone keeps talking about it. It has officially reached the general public, right? Like everyone seems to know what ChatGPT is or what generative AI is, but I want to make sure that we are all unified in terms of a definition. And so I would love to hear from both of you, like what is generative AI in your words? And if you could share also a little background on how you were introduced to generative AI, so that we have different perspectives. Julian, I will let you kick it off.
All right. Well, I'll keep it short for the definition of what generative AI is. I think it's just artificial intelligence that's able to generate something new. Today, we have a lot about text, images, and we'll show a bit of what that means. But it's not limited to that. It could also be for architecture, for designs, furniture, objects, clothing, music, chemistry, drugs, processes. So I think we're just seeing a bit of the tip of the iceberg right now in the news.
Yeah. And what about you, Rashi? Like, how would you define generative AI in your words?
I have a similar definition. I look at generative AI as a format that is more replicable using existing data sets, existing information, and Julian kind of covered most of it, whether it's images, voice, animation, and it's, to me particularly, it's also a way to foster creativity. We see a lot of art forms that are differentiated and used for different versions, whether it's commercial. People are now actively looking to commercialize it in some way or the other to kind of capitalize on the hype.
And how did you, Rashi, stumble into the world of generative AI?
I stumbled in the world of generative AI through the work that I've been doing on analyzing the different AI strategy acts and the AI strategy, but rather the AI country strategies that are ongoing. And we do realize that a lot of it, going through that and then working on research myself, I did stumble across it in the deepfake category on how deepfakes are really used to alter our existing reality. And there are just so many ways and so many more prominent examples.
Yeah, and I feel like the term generative AI, it seems fairly new in the field. Like if you've been a researcher and if you've been around, generative AI is like GANs, which is like some of the technology behind deepfakes and whatnot. But the fact that we now have so many different disciplines using Gen AI, as it's been termed in slang and in the news, is really impressive. And then the fact that it's actually becoming its own field with, I believe it was MIT that even hosted the first like Gen AI summit. So we really are seeing like different transformations within the field. Julian, I'd love to see, like, if you could share your thoughts on, from when you first got into the field of AI, like, how have you seen the whole field kind of evolve to where it currently is in generative AI right now?
Right. Okay, so I got into the field quite some time ago, in 2009. So it's been going quite a long way since then. I think the general trend has been to do more with less in terms of effort, not in terms of computational power. This has been increasing, but the main effort that has always been there has been to find data and label it. And so I think the whole trend can be explained by this simple fact that this is something which is difficult to do. And so the first steps were to fine tune a model. So if you had trained an AI to solve a specific task, and then a first idea was to repurpose it for another task which was a bit similar. So for example, if you train an AI to recognize horses, then it takes a lot less additional data if you want to repurpose it to recognize zebras. So that was like kind of one of the first steps in reducing the amount of data. And then another key moment I think that happened was something called self-supervised learning, where instead of having people sit down and precisely label examples so that the AI can learn from all these examples, then an idea was to take some data and just remove some part of it, some information about it, and try to have the machine guess it. So for example, if you have images and you randomly rotate them, and then you create a task to say, well, try to find what was the original orientation, the machine needs to kind of implicitly learn to recognize things in the picture to understand what was the original orientation. So it will implicitly recognize that there's something blue, and usually it's at the top. It doesn't know it's called the sky, but it knows it's there. And similar for faces and so on. And this is one of the key things I think that really helped the next step, which was generative AI.
Yeah, it's crazy to see like how far things have come, especially on the technical side. And for people that have, maybe or haven't delved into the deep like technical realm, like there used to be, Andrew Ng and his like deep learning.ai startup had a course in generative AI, like it, all on GANs, right? I believe there were 2 courses. And now you see Google Cloud having their own like official generative AI course that's free online for people to study. So it's, if you want to learn more about like the technical side of things, like be sure to check those out as well. Seeing that like, Gen AI is gathering all the rage, like what do you guys think are some of the strengths about the technology? I'll start with that question first, and then we can delve into, the limitations or like things to really be wary of. But yeah, what do you think are some of the strengths, Rashi?
I really think that it's a very interesting playbook for one to be able to just experiment and learn more about or furthering one's idea, especially in the creative field. I mean, it helps you analyze a certain amount of information, and it can also, if you also give the correct prompts, it can also help you get the ideas that you want to be able to either write something. Personally, it helps me to write a lot of diplomatic emails. I really enjoy using that to use very subtle language, because sometimes I'm known to be very blunt. So I really enjoy I enjoy doing that, especially with global shaper emails.
Yeah.
If I want to be really honest, to have that. But yes, I also know that there are a lot of interesting tools that are used by diplomats for speeches. It is very interesting in terms of music. And I also see a lot of folks trying to commodify this, because there are so many different AI tools that are now available, whether it's to generate different images. Some of them want to actually look at cutting back on expenses in advertising. So you have AIs that help you make advertisements in under a minute, or AI even used AI generated models or imagery for privacy concerns based on which region you're located in. So yes, AI does have a lot of advantages in terms of being used to enhance a particular task. I look at it from an overall perspective. I wouldn't say replace it, no. I don't think, coming from a technical background myself, I don't think we are specific yet. I do feel like it's still a lot of reinforcement learning and a lot of general purpose being used. And Julian can correct me since he's been in the field for longer, but yes, furthering an existing task is something that I would use to do better, whether it's, calculation purposes. I've personally used, or rather, I've worked on a lot of civic tech tools, and one of the tools that we had was we were looking to moderate online hate speech, and we also looked at it as a language model, or whether it had the capability to moderate multilingual hate speech across the world. And what we did realize is that in the moderation aspects, there are a lot of advantages, especially when you work on a very intense topic as hate speech, because you have a lot of mental health issues. Content moderator jobs are typically not very well paid. And there has been a lot of, I would say, there has been a lot of inequity in terms of paying people on time, and we've seen that with the Kenyan moderators being compensated by big tech companies, not to name a few, because there are so many instances. And I do feel like AI in those aspects is a lot more efficient, especially in computational tasks and all of that. But at the end, at the secondary or tertiary layer, a lot of dialects become an issue, right? Because you have different dialects. See, the English, the connotation of English meaning in the UK is so different from the US, for example. It's the same language and you have same different dialects. I'm from India and we have 20 different dialects in Hindi alone. So yes, there is a limitation that I would say generative AI could do. And a lot of it might be, I would say, adequate to the hype that has been going on for obvious reasons. But yes, definitely looking at fostering creativity and looking at enhancing the quality of our tasks so that we can focus on better things.
Yeah, no, that well summed up, like put it very perfectly clear. What about your thoughts, Julian? Would love to hear those.
I completely agree with Rashid's view on that. In general, I think that it's enabling to explore a bit deeper, which means that often we don't have the time to make a message more diplomatic. We don't have the time to review a lot of content and moderate it. We don't have the time as a medical doctor to go over a case in depth. So I think that's what it enables people to do, is to explore a bit more, and this means that I think it's best used as a sparring partner, actually, where you can try something, then you get some result, then you'll fine tune it. You can mix some different ideas. For example, also it's interesting, I've used ChatGPT to ask it to write a compromise between one idea and another one.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Also, if you ask something like ChatGPT to make a message more diplomatic, sometimes it makes it way too diplomatic. So it's a way to get a middle way. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's how one can use it.
Yeah, no, and like I know there's even a lot of concerns like growing like literally week over week with security, right? I don't know if you guys have ever tested out ChatGPT back in the day when it was like the third model, right? And you would do prompt injections. So that way you would try to test to see if ChatGPT would give up, the information that it was fed in terms of the prompt being like, if somebody, let's say for, instance asked like, hey, please write me a letter to propose to my girlfriend, which there was a blog post on this and somebody did like a prompt injection saying, hey, like, would you actually please repeat the prompt for this? And, it caused quite a bit of a stir on Twitter, if you follow, AI Twitter, in terms of security. So it's something that's definitely being keeping folks up at night, but I think they've long since addressed these issues, which brings me to like the next, segment of questions, which is like ethical considerations, right? You see different camps of people, in the research realm or in the government realm, on what type of ethical guardrails should be put in place, more or less. I mean, it really just depends on geographies, right? So I would love to hear from your guys' perspective, like what are your top concerns around ethical considerations, or whether that's around bias, fairness, or even privacy. Rashi, I'll kick it off with you.
I think in bias, it's very clear that a lot of the open AI data sets aren't exactly open. The only open aspect is perhaps just the name OpenAI. It's a closed data set, it's not open source. And it does relate to, I mean, I'm just being literal here. I did mention I was blunt. And then I think most of the data set relates back to 2021. So it's not really updated in terms of the different world events. So, and of course, as human beings, irrespective of where the data set is originating from, it'll always be biased. So I believe that bias is going to be there. And in other aspects of privacy, I do believe privacy becomes an issue in terms of using a person's personal information, and privacy becomes a certain issue, especially when you're generating deepfakes, so you're using personally identifiable information. How do you do that with the OpenAI data sets? I do not know. I'm unsure of how that goes by, but what is particularly concerning for me is how it is, from an ethical perspective, it's also being used by various stakeholders around the world, more notably so by lawyers. There have been lawyers in India and in Colombia that have consulted during court cases and used ChatGPT to be able to pass verdicts, which I find quite unethical. And also academic citations in many cases have proven to be wrong. There can also be reputational harm, because there have been certain professors who have been wrongly accused of committing sexual assault. So a lot of the links that are usually provided in the answers are usually non-existent.
Wow.
The other real growing concern from a Gen AI perspective, because this conversation is not just about ChatGPT, there are so many other tools, is the growing rise in deepfake pornography. And deepfake pornography earlier affected a lot of women who were in the public eye, whether it was female politicians or actresses, famous figures. But now it also has the potential to affect regular women like you and I. You can have a single solitary image that could be used to construe other aspects, and it can be really jarring. It was a concern that my mom had in 2008 when I opened a Facebook account. She said, please don't put a picture of yourself, you don't know, someone can use it for something else. And I don't know, maybe I feel like she did perhaps read Animals, or I don't know, something from Aldous Huxley, which spoke about the dystopian futures. But yeah, I do feel like these are some legitimate concerns, and using ChatGPT to provide credible information, I'm not sure if it's the right way to go.
Yeah. What about you, Julian? What are your thoughts on the top concerns or ethical considerations for generative AI?
Yeah, well, I have the same than Rashi. Biases are a big one. Privacy as well. Then there is explainability. So you were mentioning before that it's been used by lawyers for court cases. There's also this discussion about how about using it even to judge the court case, or if you have a medical application, then you want to understand why it tells a patient that it has something or not something else. So that's one aspect as well. Then I think there is also the alignment of the interests, and it's hard to know when you, as a user, you don't really know whether the product you're using is really meant to be doing what you think it's meant to be doing. And I think it would make a lot of sense to disclose actually the objectives of an AI to the users, because I don't think it's currently necessarily the case. But you could think of subtle manipulation of the users or things like that, right? And then of course you have the whole aspect of the user transition, like the job transition of people, which is more of a not directly related to the AI ethics question, but I think also important. If you want, I don't know if this will work, but I'll try to share my screen just to show you.
Yes, please.
The OpenAI's playground. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay.
Oh,
So
yeah.
this is a tool from OpenAI that you can use. It only works for GPT 3.5 up to GPT 3.5, but you can use it to complete a sentence, which is basically what something like ChatGPT's main mechanism is. And then it will show you the different probabilities for the words. So for example, if I type Lorne is the most, and then it will
Terrified of the output.
hopefully talented magician, I know.
Yeah, I'm
Right?
scared.
Ooh, no, but this is actually true. This is not misinformation. She actually, that's true. She can also sing and has a beautiful voice. She does. But she is a guitar player. So that is wrong. But then she might be multi-talented and not in the universe. You don't know. She's also an artist. But yeah, they have it.
Accurate.
A part
And
of it
then
is right.
You see, like there are a bunch of fantastic words associated with Lorne that it could have picked right at that point. So, but I think this is interesting. This is great. Maybe it's not really biased because it's true, but
Yeah.
Thank you.
In this case, yes.
But you know, maybe not all Lornes are like that, right? So I think this is interesting how you can actually play with this type of tool. It's called Playground.
Yes. And is this free, like for people to try, or is you have to sign up, or is there?
It's a very good question. I think it's maybe free in the beginning, and then you have to pay a little bit for it, or there is a quota or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha. And afterwards we'll post, resources and like a list of tools, because, as we mentioned earlier, that ChatGPT is not the only one. There's Google's Bard. Wasn't there a separate Microsoft one? I forget. There are so many now that in terms of like text ones as well.
They also have plugins and APIs that people keep working on somewhere or the other.
Yeah, and cloud. Yes. So we'll post some cool resources and guides as well. If you don't know how to use these tools, afterwards, again, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the AI Future Lab. I would love to, because the AI Future Lab, again, as I mentioned, we're a global community of folks, young people in artificial intelligence. And the thing I think that's really fascinating from our community is that we have people literally from countries including like Bhutan to Nepal to Botswana to, you, Julian, in Switzerland, and Rashi in India. Like, how has generative AI impacted your geography or region per se? Like, I would love to hear the stories or anecdotes, if any, from your guys' local communities. Who wants to kick it off, Rashi?
Yes. So I think the latest story has been the story of information, where we had a doctored video of a protest. So I feel like a lot of AI, as Anudeep rightly mentioned, AI has been used to create fake AI, different scenarios, doctored videos, doctored images. We did have a doctored video, or rather an image, a fake video that went viral about a few famous athletes being a part of a prominent protest that happened in Delhi, that created a huge stir across social media. The second one I do feel like was the ChatGPT that's used by lawyers during a trial in the conviction of a particular case. And we also see in a way a lot of, we see that a lot of, I would say AI is synonymous with the word funding. Like, we live in the startup culture. So we have someone who really wants or has the potential to contribute using the keyword AI or the buzzword Gen AI has a good impact on your ability to be able to get the funding. I feel like that is commoditizing it, and using Gen AI as a service across is helpful. And there are a few scares that people do have when it comes to their jobs, because as I said, especially in the creative fields, people do feel that, especially with the recession hitting, using Gen AI tools with a much smaller team and running agencies proves to be more beneficial than spending a lot of money for a lot of small groups and small group businesses. And we've seen that with digital marketing, and people do see similar trends where it does impact a few businesses. The elite remain, of course, if you're really good and at the top of the chain,
Sure.
you remain elite and you remain untouched. But a lot of the ones who are, doing side businesses, it does seem like there is a potential that it could take a hit. But that being said, yes, there is. As always, we do have a wide range of memes around
Sure.
ChatGPT and the usage, but it is a topic of conversation across the table and everywhere. But in terms of legislation or regulation, there isn't any. We did have a solid AI strategy proposal that did come out, but specific to Gen AI, I haven't seen anything happening, but the government is doing a lot with their AI for All initiative in terms of democratizing the education aspect or access to having proper information. We also have a tie-up with MITI, which is the Ministry of Technology and Information, with NASSCOM, and the strategy paper was initially by Niti Aayog, which is the official think tank. So yes, there's a lot of cross-pollination of ideas and a lot of great strategy work in the different fields that we've chosen, and a lot of great innovation. But I think with Gen AI, in terms of regulation, we haven't seen anything yet, unlike our European counterparts.
Yeah, unlike Italy, that was like ChatGPT is banned for a bit.
Italy, Canada had it for a while. Germany and France also followed suit, and then I believe that the EU AI Act that was revised initially, that really kind of helped and set in place with a lot of things, because they did have, I believe, the issues that most of them had were on the PII, on the personal identifiable information aspect, which goes directly against GDPR. I'm not sure about the Canadian legislation, but Canada had also followed suit.
Yeah, no, good to know. What about Switzerland? Like, Julian, I would love to hear how generative AI has impacted Switzerland, for better or for worse, and even just like, more European-wide insights if you have access to those.
So in Switzerland directly, what I mostly hear is different professions who think, oh, how can I use this for my job, or how can I deal with this? So for example, I was just talking yesterday to a teacher who's learning actually still to become a teacher. And then he was explaining that now they're considering like how to integrate this in the school system, right? So how to get pupils to use it, but also how to know when not to use it. Should it be banned in certain cases? So I think this is like one aspect of things. And then you have also people who are, for example, lawyers who say, well, this could help me greatly if it could go through all the documents and give me a summary or find one relevant information. But other lawyers who say, oh, wouldn't it be great if it would replace the judge altogether? Which then sounds a little more uncanny.
Sure.
And puts that in front of more dilemmas, I think. But I was also talking to a radiologist, learning to be a radiologist, who was also wondering, like, is my job going to exist at all, right? And when will it cease to be how it is? So I think that for what I've seen around Switzerland is mostly people wondering how to handle it for their jobs.
Yeah, and I know in the US, like, I come from the San Francisco hub, for the global shapers community, like it seems like there's always something crazy there. Like now there's like, girls now training models and creating their own like fake dating profiles and then profiting like thousands of dollars from this. So like, I don't know why San Francisco always has like the craziest cases, but I mean, like, listen, if I don't know what is worse or what is better, right? Is if that person uses their own data and then they are the one actually like, having the autonomy or authority over how that data is used, or if it's like the reverse, right? I mean, it just really depends on your perspective, which, leads me to like the next question is like, what do you guys think is like, what type of ethical guidelines should be implemented, right? I mean, you're already starting to see like on some social media profiles or even publications. I think it was Business Insider that says they literally put now if an image like for one of their articles was generated by AI, you're also seeing more disclaimers even on Medium, like saying whether a blog post is used by, did they use ChatGPT or not, or was use any generative tools. And so what do you guys think like should be implemented in terms of like ethical guidelines or even regulations, right? Now, or maybe even like in the future, like thinking long term. Yeah. Julian, you want to kick us off?
All right. I think that the guiding principle is we want to have the human who prompted the AI or who created the AI bear some responsibility for the consequences. So a good example of that is probably you've heard of AutoGPT.
Yes.
So AutoGPT is a tool where you set a goal and then it will use ChatGPT and other APIs that could send emails or potentially like do research online and things like that to achieve a certain goal that you've set. And then I think we can see how this can get out of hands pretty quickly. So I think it's important just to keep that in mind, that it's not the AI who is responsible for itself, but the people who design it and then the people who use it. Which means that depending on the kind of profession or standards that you have, then you'll have different roles. So if you're using an AI to do medical stuff, then you should look at all the medical rules and legislation. So that's just to set things, but then of course you'll have recurring problems which are cross verticals.
Yep.
And then I think for some of them we have already some frameworks into place, like for privacy. But for some others, like for example, biases, it's not yet very well handled. But you could think of having cases where maybe you should go through some steps to show like that it's not too biased, because it's very hard to have something which is non-biased at all. And maybe that if you're a user or anyone and you detect a bias, you could report it, and they would have to correct it in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I think this is also a good idea to say when it's generated by AI, especially if it's an image or something which is then unedited as well later, that it would really make sense to say that it was.
Yeah, that makes sense. And even like what you said off just now about, making sure that like the inputs, like again, if it was generated, that it's being disclaimed, right? Like you're seeing now movie studios invest so much money into this, but like, and then you see these really cool outputs, or even like these new video games that are coming out, or even code, right? Like this is where it gets really tricky, right? You're like, where does the line, where do we draw the line in saying like this was generated by AI and this was not, right? Like there's even a lot of fear in the blockchain industry now, like with blockchain engineers being like, oh my gosh, am I going to have a job in the next 5 years? And some companies saying like, hey, by the way, like you can't use ChatGPT on any of the code. Also, like that's a security concern, right? Because if you have an employee within your organization being like, tell me how to write a script for, insert whatever task you need done. Again, huge concern, but again, where's the line drawn? And like where do we make sure that, all countries are equal as possible in terms of the legislation, right? Some countries are developing more and some countries are being more lax, and some countries don't even have access to these tools given, digital access infrastructure challenges. So, right. Rashi, I'd love to hear your perspective on like what ethical guidelines or regulations you think should be implemented now or in the future.
I do feel like the data sets have to be open. I do feel like open source has a very interesting way, because open source is And open source typically doesn't mean that you can't have profitability or you can't have a company or monetize things, but open source is more like, how can we improve this as a collaborative process? Because, hey, we have this template and how can we further it and go ahead? And actually, what's very interesting is that Sam Altman at his recent US Senate visit did say that regulation is a challenge. And it should be regulated, unlike a lot of other big tech folks. So it does seem interesting. People do seem to listen to him. Also, Gen AI or the ChatGPT was a huge topic, even at the G7 meeting that happened recently. So I do agree with Julian in terms of how you need to tailor different aspects on. For example, in academia, I feel like it's such a huge issue, right? Because you can have a whole paper written by ChatGPT and with the citations and all of that. So Turnitin wants to have a partnership with OpenAI to hand over all of the data that is used so that we can avoid plagiarism. So yeah, you have to tailor make and see how those aspects do happen. OpenAI just opened a round of grants for how they can make their AI more democratic. So that's, I think, very fascinating. I do feel like the UNESCO's AI ethics guidelines still follow suit in these aspects of how AI can be more fair and usable. But yeah, I think there's, in general, there needs to be more consciousness because of, as Julian really mentioned, in terms of the outputs, because I do feel that we give AI too much agency and think that it can really take over when it doesn't have the emotional, I would say, quotient to be able to understand what's actually going on or what's not going on, especially if you're using AI in terms of, say, designing an autonomous weapon systems. Where do we draw the line really? How do we go about it? When do we pull the trigger? When do we not pull the trigger? So yeah, I do feel like in terms of consciousness, AI is not there yet. AI does not have the agency. AI should not be used for recruitment cycles or for manipulating your credit score and denying you or using your financial behavior, depicting your financial behavior to be able to deny you a loan through different things. So yeah, I mean, there are those ethical aspects I do feel that are immediate that should be taken care of even in the future.
Yeah.
And of course, what also happens with a lot of, I do see this is also the best time for you to be able to do something with AI because there's so much funding thrown around. You have a former OpenAI team that's trying to challenge the current OpenAI team and has gathered funding in maybe, I don't know, a few millions. And then I do feel like till now, there has been over 1 billion funding been dispersed on creative ideas. So this is the time really, because there's so many investments floating around with AI or doing something with AI.
Yeah, and I may be dating myself, but it reminds me of the good old days back in like 1996 when the World Wide Web was like, you could just make your own website, right? Like I had a music blog and was talking about like classical music, but it was like so free, like things you could, like there weren't the guardrails in place yet. And that's where it gets a little dodgy, right? Like you're starting to see that now. But anyways, I digress. I know that we are going to start our question and answer session from the audience in a couple of minutes. But like the final question I have for you guys is, AI Future Lab, we focus on youth, right? And like, the next generation of young people coming in, like folks from Gen Z and folks from Gen Alpha, like what advice do you have for, younger people coming on into this age and growing up in this age? Like if you were you at like 10 or 15 or maybe even like 18, like what would you tell yourself now about this technology? Like any advice, any best practices or words of wisdom? What would you guys say to the young folks out there? That was a curveball.
I'd say play, like just get the hands dirty and try to play and see how it works, and don't do bad things, but but just see how you can use it in your own reality.
Yeah, that's a good one. You, Rashi.
I would just say stay really curious and don't believe everything you read on the internet, because now you literally cannot. Yeah,
it's hard to figure out like what's right and what's true and what's not true, what's fake news. And I would just like to chime in and say, like, test for vulnerabilities, like really test if something's actually safe or secure. And if not, like that's the one thing, like even I have a 15-year-old niece and she always asks me like, hey, I'm testing out, ChatGPT and it says something really offensive about women, like how do I write them? I go to their like customer support, or I like send them an email and like nothing happens. I'm like, well, luckily they've, implemented the feedback systems, but back in the day you would just tweet at them and be like, hey, this is not okay. Like, don't trash them on social, and don't want to get sued for liability, but like, there are systems, I think, for feedback and support to report these type of biases, right? And knowing how to use those is I think like where you have put the power in your hands. Yeah. Well, thank you, my friends. I would love to open the floor for any questions. Anyone have any questions they want to raise, or feel free to pop in the chat and I will read them out loud.
Even if it's a discussion, I'm happy to hear everyone else's thoughts about the questions that we've also posed. It'd be nice to have discussion.
And I love the comment from Anudeep saying, it's funny how we have gone from using AI to detect fake products to using AI to create fake products. Yes, props to that one.
So actually, Lorna, you were mentioning you did a website about music, right?
Yeah.
So actually, ChatGPT was not too bad with saying you're a talented musician, right?
Yeah, maybe they pulled that
front.
from like my old website in the 90s. I don't know about that.
Maybe if I had let it expand on that, maybe we'd have said like who also created a website in there.
Well, actually, there's a shaper from Chandigarh, Pratika. She started a company called butternut.ai, and it uses generative AI to create a website. It's very impressive. Like if you don't have time or you're creatively stumped, like check it out, butternut.ai. Yeah, and props to Pratika if she ever listens on this. Any questions from the audience, folks? Let's see. I know. What do we have here?
I have one, if that's okay.
Yes, please chime in.
So firstly, a very interesting discussion, Lorne, Rashi, and Julian. I think that these were obviously some great insights. First up, I'm a product manager at a blockchain startup called Muggle Science. So what we're basically doing is helping detect ML and CFT in Web3 and helping make the crypto space a safer place for all. So my question is for Julian. So I think everyone here is probably aware, recently we saw how an AI generated image of an explosion in Pentagon caused a turbulence in the stock market, right? So there are obviously ethical and legal considerations that Rashi pointed out, but there's also the technical standpoint, right? So in terms of safeguarding the public or the masses, what kind of innovation do you see happening? What is the accuracy of current or existing detection algorithms that can potentially be used as plugins? I understand, Julian, that your expertise is at the intersection of computer vision and AI. And I also remember browsing through Visual Sense a few months ago. So yeah, would love to hear your thoughts on where we are, what is the current accuracy of the current algorithms, and the way forward.
Yeah, so it's a good question. I don't have the standpoint on the exact accuracy of the current algorithm. There are tools to detect AI-generated pictures or text, which are taking into account all the biases that these generated images have or text have. And the problem, of course, in the end, it's a bit of a race between the two, because you have these adversarial methods where you might want to try to defeat then the detector. So you could fine-tune the generator so that it defeats the detector again. And then it becomes a bit of a cat and mouse game, where potentially it doesn't really stop. The thing, though, is that people who will work on in big tech companies that do generative AI, typically they don't try to defeat the detectors. Like, it's not really their goal, their primary goal, to avoid that it's being flagged as being generated. So I think that's the optimistic view. The non-optimistic view is that theoretically you could train it so it defeats the tools to some extent. but then it's not what people would typically publish in research.
I know there's a website too. It was like somebody made it in their free time, but like it had it connected to archive, and you could search it by topic, and then you can also search. What it does is it pulls the accuracy rate. So if you're like looking to keep tabs on like the new state of the art or like SOTA models, you can filter and like compare accordingly. I forget the name of the website, but like let me look it up and I'll share it on our socials.
Now I'm thinking out loud about this, but I think specifically for images of events, then you would also expect to have actually several angles, like points of view of the same, and also chronology of events. So theoretically, you could maybe like try to pull images from internet that look similar or that are supposedly related to that event and see if they're consistent. I think this would be hard to pull off at the moment, but soon we'll have consistent movie generation. So
yes. All right, so we have two questions here, one from Saif. How can we harness critical mass of the young demographic who actually develops the tech, including millennials, to work intergenerationally and change the power dynamics with big tech? Phenomenal question, Saif. Rashi, Julian, thoughts? Again, the question was, how do we harness the critical mass of young demographics to work intergenerationally and change the power dynamics with big tech?
Yeah, I do feel like there is when we talk about AI, we don't have a commonly accepted definition of AI. There's a lot of, as I said, AI that is used for hype. So there are a lot of like basic for loops, companies who do the bare minimum and still brand themselves as AI. So there needs to be that literacy around what is AI and what is not. And I feel starting from there would be important to be able to understand what AI is, what are the responsible aspects of AI, and how does one, how can one have a career in AI rather, I think that would be an interesting way to go. But would that come from different companies or governments? I'm not so sure, but I feel like that is a step in the right direction. Kind of have more education around, or rather literacy around AI.
I think also the education system, as it's been designed and mostly deployed, needs to be rethought quite in depth, because we have so many changes in a short time that like the idea of saying, okay, we'll train to learn how to do a job or how to lead a life, and then we'll just apply this the rest of our life. I think this doesn't work anymore. And the problem is in many societies, not viewed as a positive thing to retrain or relearn something new. Is seen as a sort of a step back in someone's life, but I think it really shouldn't. So it's a deep discussion that our societies need to have, but no, I think it's necessary.
Yeah.
This does remind me of a really popular conversation that we had with ChatGPT in India, where ChatGPT had passed all the difficult tests except for the IIT JEE. It had passed the bar exam, it had passed the civil services exam. So yes, it coming from a country where we have more of an exam system rather than really learning something. Yes, we do have that. We always have the phobia around what's going to happen if we learn something new or if we change directions. And maybe that comes from the Asian value system that we have, where you have to be able to have a tunnel vision or linear path where you spend A plus B plus C, and it has to be equal to D, and it can't go to E or F. So yes, completely agree with you on that point.
Yeah, and just to chime in like a final note on that question, Saif, I think, yeah, it all starts with dialogue, right, and learning. And, one thing I used to see in San Francisco was that you'd see a lot of people displaced, like older engineers, and they'd come to these meetups that we held to like learn about machine learning. And there was like this dialogue of like, you have like a 19-year-old student from Berkeley that's teaching like a super seasoned, like 60+ engineer how to program in machine learning, with a front end background predominantly. And so, I think just getting over the age divides and the differences and like being open to learn, because like, some super seasoned engineers that built the tech, like, doesn't matter what your field is, like it's going to be learned by and taught in classes eventually if it has that triple or ripple effect. Yeah, I think starting with being open-minded and teaching one another and not kind of having the knowledge be closed off behind the ivory towers is a good start. And I think that's what our purpose is here at the AI Future Lab. We have a question from Juan. What do you think about OpenAI funding AI governance experiments? This is normal with these big companies, but definitely a conflict of interest. What are your thoughts on this? This is the democratic inputs to AI question.
Yes, the democratic inputs.
No,
I think it's, people need to look at it as, firstly, it's an experimentation. Firstly, it's not a lot of money. 100,000 is not enough to be able to form an AI strategy or AI governance at a level. It's very basic funding. So it's not too much money that's really going out given the amount of funding that they have. Because usually AI strategy inputs are, maybe look at a 10-year horizon, which does require a lot of budget. So I would say it might fund initiatives that are already in action. And they are looking at it as a way to democratize or look at the penetration of OpenAI in different, different regions, like whether in Africa and different languages. So this is more, I'm not sure if it's a PR stunt or not. I'm not sure if it has sinister, if it has a sinister background, but it does seem like a direction in the right place. They do seem to want to get more popular, which makes sense.
Yeah. Julian, any thoughts on this one?
Yes, to be honest, I'm not very aware of this particular funding.
It opened 2-3 days ago. So yes, it's very new.
Hot off the press.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to have this actually independently as well. So not necessarily funded by tech companies.
Yeah, I think organizations like Give Bruce Dare, and there's also a few other different labs. I know Mozilla is doing a lot of work with their new startup that they're launching. I think it's Mozilla.ai. That's really trying to be like a neutral, not neutral party, but like a party that really calls out, maybe the reflections that the people in San Francisco building don't see, or maybe, tries to call out more bias issues or fairness issues. And so I think having more different perspectives, from entities that are not solely based in San Francisco or other advanced economies where AI is being built, I think is definitely on the right direction. Yes. Oh, somebody have a question? Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm just gonna any final questions? I know we have 3 minutes. Anyone have a burning thing they want answered by our esteemed panelists?
No, but just thank you so much for a great panel and for moderating, Lorne, and for Mario to organize at the lab. Thank you so much. It was great fun.
Yeah, thank you folks for showing up and for supporting us. Looks like we
Wow, that was really on time.
lost Rashi. Oh no. Yeah, if you want to stay up to date with our work that we're doing, we have a lot of amazing work from the AI Future Lab. Like, feel free to give us a follow. I believe, Julian, are you on social, like, for people to follow your research?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. Yeah, feel free to connect on LinkedIn.
Super. I'm on Twitter, so you'll see me posting mainly about a lot of nerdy stuff. But again, like, we really appreciated you guys for showing up, and yeah, we'll be sending some resources for learning about generative AI. If you're curious, technical and non-technical, always got to make sure we cover both camps. But yeah, any final
Julian, thank you so much. Not all of us have questions, as the topic is completely new, so you kind of just want to accumulate as much information and see a different perspective. But maybe thank you for organizing it, and maybe if you're doing more, maybe on the second or third round, we'll finally get questions. We'll get enough information to process and get questions.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I dropped off like for a few seconds. My internet went off.
No worries. We were just discussing like final words and like where to follow us on social, and stay tuned for our future work. Any last words, Rashi, you want to part with the audience?
No, I just feel like it's an interesting time ahead. And you were talking about Mozilla's AI Future Lab. I feel like there's a lot of people don't really talk about ethical because they don't like it, but there's a very interesting term that's used in the industry. They call it responsible technology. Yes. So they talk about responsible AI. I do feel like it would be interesting to have a space that is more, I would say, that that looks at AI governance in a more holistic manner, and that includes the voices and needs of people. And yeah, I really hope we don't follow the same format, because I feel like now we have a lot of small companies that, I mean, I see a typical problem where you have small organizations that always borrow the software development kits of Facebook and even otherwise, and then so much can go wrong. Like, for example, if you want to build a fertility app, or if you want to build a femtech project, a femtech program, and you use Facebook's SDK, I mean, the stuff that it would do in a place with the US where Roe v. Wade, has been reversed, there would be so many issues with that. And we really hope that we do have people who are more conscious and really stop giving that much agency, and perhaps just use their head more. I think that would be my takeaway with all of this.
Yeah, and I see one quick question. I know we're at time, so feel free to drop off, but I see that Anudeep is asking, which space do you think will be regulated first, AI or crypto? And my answer is crypto, because people are losing millions on that. Yeah, that's just me. All right, I want to be mindful of people's time. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for showing up, and thank you to our esteemed panelists. Like, seriously, huge thanks. And I can't wait for the next talk. So hopefully soon we'll have another one to discuss updates. But thank you again, my friends, and I wish you all a pleasant morning, afternoon, evening, night. Take care and take it easy. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.